All right. Well, first of all, I want you guys to go ahead and complete this warm up and see how you're doing on things like 1 and 2. So I'm going to ask you to pause the video right here, and then you can unpause it in just a second, and I will go through them. And if you get them, then you can just fast forward through this. So go ahead right now, pause your video, and work on these 4 problems. All right, so we have unpaused now, and now I'm going to go ahead and work them. So for right here, I'm going to use my parentheses, and I'm going to plug in 6 point minus. Remember, this right here means the opposite of x. So I'm actually going to plug in a positive 8.25, and then I'm going to add 7.5. So my new line is I have 6.9 minus 8.25 plus 7.5. If this were me, and it is, I would go ahead and add up the 2 positive values. So I would add 6 plus 9 plus 7.5 and get 14.4. And now I just have to subtract out 8.25 and not mess with any negatives here. And so when I subtract these two, I get 6.15. Okay? Next one, number 2. This one in here says it's the opposite of x. So really I'm going to plug in again a positive 8.25 with inside my absolute value bars plus 14.25 minus 6.9. Okay, anything that's the absolute value is always going to be positive. So this is going to be a positive 8.25 plus 14.25 minus 6.9. So I'm going to go ahead and add 8.25 plus 14.25, and I get 22.5, and take away 6.9, and I get 15. Wow, that doesn't look like 15, does it? 15.6 is my final answer. Okay, then the next 2 are review, because that's what we're going to go into today. So these are the 7th grade objectives right here, and we're going to be finding the product, which is a fancy way of saying multiplication here. So I'm going to take negative times a positive. A negative times a positive is always a negative, so negative 18. And number 4, if I have 3 of them, is take 2 times 5, which is 10, times 4 is 40, and then negative times a negative is always a positive. Okay? All right, so now we're going to go into our notes for today, which are going to be short and sweet and to the point, and then you're going to work on your worksheet. All right, so starting with letter A. So again, remember what I just said. If you have a negative times a positive, the answer is always negative. If you have a negative times a negative, the answer is always positive. I always say if you have 2 negatives, take 2 negatives to make a positive sign. All right, so this one right here, I have a negative times a positive, so that's going to be negative. And then the way I multiply fractions, I'm going to take 5 over 11. I'm going to put negative 66 over 1. And you can multiply straight across the numerator and straight across the denominator, and then you have to reduce at the end. Well, I would prefer not to have 66 times 5 and get 330 and then try to reduce it. So what you can do instead, if you want to, is do some cross canceling. So I look at this 11 and this 66, and both of them share the factor of 11. So 11 can go into itself 1 time, and it can go in here 6 times. So it's like I'm reducing before I start. So 11 goes into itself once, 11 goes into 66 6 times. And now I can go ahead and multiply straight across the numerator. 5 times negative 6, which would be negative 30. And this would just be 1 times 1. So the denominator would be 1. I don't need to write 30 over 1. So my final answer is just negative 30. All right, same thing here works for letter B, except I have 3 of them. I still have a negative times a negative, which is going to make my final answer a positive. Okay, and then I need to put 14 over 1. So I'm going to put 14 over 1 times negative 3 over 5 times negative 5 over 7. Okay, so again, I can choose to multiply straight across and do 14 times 3 times 5, and then take 5 times 7, and then reduce that. But I don't like to do that. I like to cross cancel. So I notice that 5 and 5, well, 5 and 5, they'll both go into each other, so that'll go in 1 time. That'll go in 1 time. And then I also look and I see the 7 and the 14. 7 will go into itself once, and 7 will go into 14 2 times. So now I have 2 times a negative 3 times a 1, times a negative 1, which will give me a positive 6. 1 times 1 times 1 is still 1 again, so I don't have anything in the denominator except 1, but 6 over 1 would just be 6. And that won't happen every time. Sometimes you're going to get a fraction, and that's okay. You just want to always make sure your fractions are in lowest terms. And that is it. So you guys can go ahead and get started on your homework.